back to Brian's beat.
Indeed. Let's get back to this show. You know what I said before? It's Woody Woodpecker Day. I think it's only appropriate that we do a little Woody Woodpecker.
Guess who?
Oh, my God. How do we get to the point that we have a Woody Woodpecker Day? Like I said this earlier, you can't hear every minute of every show. But if you know the correct people and you've got the right amount of money, you can commemorate just about anything. Woody Woodpecker, Bugs Bunny, Bugs, Daffy, Mickey, they are in a different category than Woody Woodpecker. Welcome to Woody Woodpecker Day. What else can you say? In a little bit, we're going to be talking to Maurice Wilkie. He is with radio station WERS. He's a manager over there. And he has had a chance to look at some of the encampments in the city of Boston and Cambridge. And we'll talk to him about that in just a bit. Before we go down that particular road, let's hear from you at 508-996-0500. Hello.
Hello, what's up, Doc? How's it going, Brian?
Okay.
A new intro. Hey, you got a lot of good topics, and you do a great job. I'm going to introduce a topic that you might not be aware of, but on the campuses, I was watching a field reporter out in NYU and Columbia, and they were on the ground. They said a lot of those tents looked the same, like they went to the same store and bought them. And many of the anti-Israel protesters weren't even students of the school, and they were older adults. And the police were telling them to get off the campus because they didn't belong there to begin with. I think it's been infiltrated.
I think that there are certainly protesters that aren't students that are out there protesting. I don't argue that at all. The other part of that is, people go to school at a later age, so they could be older. They could be part-time students at these campuses. Columbia, like Harvard, has a great extension program. People want to have that Ivy degree behind them, and so they go at night to these schools. It's hard to tell, but the important part here, trespassing, I guess, can be a crime. I won't try to argue that, but are they being peaceful about what they're doing, or are they being a-holes?
Yeah, that's the thing. But if you are not a student of the campus, you shouldn't be there to begin with. But as far as the nip bottles are concerned, you can go to Fairhaven. As far as I understand, doesn't sell nip bottles, but you can go to a Acushnet in Dartmouth. You can buy a lot of them, and then people drink and throw it in as they walk down the city of New Bedford. So that's not deterrent. I think it's stupid. And, Dartmouth and Acushnet are going to make a lot of money. But on this ban thing, was a story in the Boston Herald that there's 10 cities and towns here in the Commonwealth are going to ban all sales of tobacco products, including cigarettes, and Brookline is at the forefront of the ban. So all of this stuff, I don't know if you were aware of that, but you might want to look it up.
We talked about the Brookline one here on this show. So I know about that one, but what you're telling me now is there are other communities thinking about doing the same thing.
Yeah, and if New Bedford's copycat, you're going to have these city councils. They're going to try to push the same thing, but they'll tell you that you can have a pot shop in every corner. It's going to raise a lot of money, and it stinks a lot more than cigarettes. So you can't have now you can't even smoke a menthol cigarette or, whatever. You can't have chewing tobacco, but you can smoke dope and drive your car down the highway going 80 miles an hour. That's why there's a lot of cars going into homes and down power lines. It's
Why, you
happening even.
think it's because people are smoking pot while they're driving?
I believe so. Oh,
Yeah.
they're high as a kite. They come here to the city. And you were talking about, these programs. Yeah, because there's a list. New Bedford's at the top of the list, and they know that most of our city councilors, they can be easily bamboozled to extract taxpayer dollars. I mean, I don't think there's any program that the city councilors have said no. I mean, an exception to Sean Oliver and Leo Choquette. The rest of them, like I told Chris, they're the rubber stamp the spending squad.
Well,
they
I'll
don't
tell
even
you
know
what.
what's.
If you saw the city council finance committee the other night, it looked to me like there was a lot of rubber stamping when it came to the CPA. You've got people that are into it. I got to let you go, but I do appreciate the call. Thank you. And it's easy for me to comment, not because I don't live in the city of New Bedford, but because I'm against the CPA. I wouldn't have voted for any of those projects. And that has nothing to do on the merit of the particular project. But at the same time, you've got a bunch of counselors that didn't vote no on any of these projects. What does that tell you? 508-996-0500. Oh, you know what? Let me get back to this. How could I possibly forget? Monthly Fee RX brings you the Brian's Beat quote of the day. If you're spending less than $20 a month for prescription drugs, great. If not, then our Monthly Fee RX service might be a good option for you. Check for yourself at monthlyfeerx.com. Coretta Scott King has our Brian's Beat quote of the day. My story is a freedom song, a struggle. It is about finding one's purpose, how to overcome fear, and to stand up for causes bigger than oneself. It is. Maurice Wilkie is the operations manager at WERS in Boston. It's the Emerson College radio station. He is a former news producer of yours truly's news and public affairs programming that I used to do up in the city of Boston. He's also worked at a couple of other radio stations up in the city, and he and I were having a conversation the other day because he is at Emerson College, and I said, you know what? I would like you to tell your story to us here, because I think many times we hear one thing and we think, well, it's got to be like that everywhere. So, Maurice, very good morning. I know it's early for you. I'm glad that you could make it on to Brian's Beat.
Good morning, Brian. How are you?
Winging my wang, my man, like I always do on Saturday mornings.
You haven't changed.
I was going to say that certain things haven't changed. I was winging back in the 90s, and I'm still winging today. But on a more serious note, I don't know if you've had a chance to take a peek. Northeastern University had a crackdown with state police and campus police earlier this morning, and it seems to be going all around. You're at Emerson. A student had his arm broken. Another one had his leg broken. Basically, all we hear about over there at Emerson now is that 4 police officers were somehow injured. Yet folks that are doing the background check, they can't find anything in the police reports.
Correct. I did hear of 2 students being injured. I did see some student-related video to the the students from the Boylston Street alley. I didn't know the extent of their injuries. I mean, some of the takedowns by public safety and law enforcement was pretty severe, so I'm not surprised at hearing those injuries occurred for students. I did not know about Northeastern until just recently.
So when you say pretty severe, what you categorize that for me?
Well, going back to the morning of, the police confronting the students who formed basically a chain line in the Boylston place. Boylston Street has an alley, basically, that on one side is a building that is Emerson College is on the other side. It's also some dorms on the other side, too. So think of student offices, classrooms on one side and dorms on the other side. And the alley basically divides the two buildings, and then it goes back towards the Massachusetts Transportation Building. So law enforcement came out of the Transportation Building towards the students who were basically encamped upon the side, who had basically formed like a wall. I mean, they saw law enforcement coming towards them. And then, I mean, I guess words were exchanged. I could not see. I saw some aerial views from students. I saw also a ground point of view. And it was, it wasn't like politely like escorting people. It was kind of, pushing, shoving, and then grabbing of persons. The video illustrates it pretty clearly. A lot of students were not clearly as big as the law enforcement officers.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear that. Can you say that part again, please?
I mean, from a visual standpoint, in terms of size, in terms of their physiology, the police officers were bigger than the students, whom they were, trying to tell to move out of the way.
What were the students doing, though? Were they being combative, swearing, saying anti-Semitic terms or anything like that?
Based on video I've seen, based on, my passing by the alley, it was not a verbal anti-Semitic display by the students. Now, I was not there 24/7. They were basically, when I spoke to one of the students, they were about, divestment, any divestments that the school might have been connected to. I asked them a little bit further and pushed them. Do they know of specific ones? They did not say that they knew of specific ones, but they had an idea, or they were pretty sure that Emerson was connected to, some of the Palestinian, ouster, but they didn't give me or go into detail.
So what do you think of all of this? I mean, you are on, I don't know if we call you the faculty, but you're on staff at the college. You've got students, a student government has voted no confidence unanimously on the president Bernhard. You've got the board of trustees who have voted confidence in Bernhard. So you've got it on both sides, and now you're staff. You don't get a vote, but you have your own personal feeling.
I mean, the president just started, and I mean, talk about a rocky start for any persons. I mean, he's been dealing with some issues around something that he was a part of writing that students of color, black students, were kind of like, upset about, and now this. And so he's had a rocky start to his tenure. I don't know of any president, outside of probably Claudine Gay, that's had as rough a start, Claudine being the president of Harvard that was ousted 6 months after just starting her job. I mean, hopefully it will get smoother for him. I don't know what commencement's going to be like. There were protests outside of his I guess, inauguration, if you'll call it, when he first kind of got started from students. I mean, this is kind of when some of the student groups where their protests of pro-Palestinian disheartment were kind of being displayed. But even before that, there was some problems with an article that he had been a part of talking about hip-hop and music and black women. And so that he wrote in the New York Times. So there's been...
I did not know. But more to the point, since you bring that up, it seems, and I think I actually heard this from you, there were a group of students that were protesting early on, not this ban this week, but they were all black students that were arrested.
They were predominantly people of color. They were not just black students. I mean, Emerson is a very diverse community, as some people may not know. And there were arrests made prior to this here in the alley, and the news that came to me from students that because there was a protest in that same alley, that they were rallying and protesting the fact that mostly students of color were being arrested and not their white counterparts.
Over the same incident, though. Over what's going on in Gaza.
Correct.
Okay. Interesting.
And all this is documented. I mean, they have a student newspaper called the Berkeley Beacon that has been doing some excellent reporting from student perspectives, and they've been pretty balanced. So, I mean, people don't necessarily have to take my word for it. They can go to the Berkeley Beacon's website and find out more about that, too.
So, as you've got the weekend off, now you go back on. In fact, you had a long weekend because school was canceled on Thursday, I believe.
Yes, Thursday morning, because the incident happened between 1:30 and 2 a.m., Emerson decided to cancel classes for that entire day, while about 108 students were being arraigned at the district court. So they thought, or Emerson officials thought, that it would probably be best because a lot of students, I'm sure, were shaken up. A lot of their friends were probably arrested. A lot of parents were probably concerned. They probably had to cancel a lot of prospective student parent visits as a result of this. So they were trying to get, around this story and settle things as best they could.
We're talking to Maurice Wilkie. He is the operations manager of WERS, the Emerson College radio station in the city of Boston. How far away are your studios from where this encampment was?
I could literally look and see the studio. I mean, think of, Boylston Street meets Tremont Street. Our studios and offices are on Tremont Street, and we are maybe, about 100 feet from Boylston Street intersection, and then you can look across at that angle towards where Boylston Street is over at basically it's against the Walker Building. The Walker Building is where the dining hall is. At that corner, literally that begins the alley. So we could see it. You can see it. I mean, if you walk either a few steps to the left as soon as you come out the main doors, and you can look down, you'll see the T-stop, and on the other side of the T-stop is the alley. You can see pretty clearly. I mean, news trucks or police or students.
Is anybody up there protesting now?
No.
The encampment down. So do you think whatever happened on Thursday has quashed any other protest on your campus?
Hard to say. I mean, I know that there is a feeling from the students. Whether or not they put that into action, I know that they've been impacted by this. That is a very good question. I mean, I know campuses across the state are doing things from Tufts to UMass Amherst. Time will tell.
All right, man. How are you going to handle it? How are you handling it now?
We are listening to our students. I mean, some of our student staff, has expressed that they want us to, at least, say something, do something about what has happened based on this past Thursday. We listen. We are about expression on our college campus, and we're definitely willing to meet the students and hear what they've got to say.
Are you saying anything on your radio show?
Our stance hasn't been that we have been taking a position prior to the protests that have happened on campus. We're not denying a student's feelings, but we're taking a position that we're kind of a free zone. We want to think of ourselves as a place that, is an escape. I mean, we have programming that could, but we right now taking a stance of choosing not to.
Well, you do music. Anytime that you throw a song on that might somehow fit the mood of what's going on, do you ever say, and this is for, X, Y, Z, no matter what side of the coin that you're on?
Well, for example, I played a song that was from 1968, which was, for some people who know history, a very tumultuous year in terms of energy, in terms of protest. I might, I might remark about, the year, and it was just, just the symbolism of it and how we're struggling with some of those same things today. But I won't necessarily mention or identify what's exactly going on. I'm like, well, this is a tumultuous year or an expressive year from 1968, where protest and expression were so part of the fabric of the society, much like we're doing today. That will probably be something that will be the closest I would reference.
Playing it safe.
I would say yes. Yes, it's always about, making sure that the license is protected. We want to be able to allow these students to have the tools to be able to use to further their advancement careers. It's not that we don't personally probably have our own feelings, but we don't necessarily think that that's the format or the place to do it at the moment. I mean, these students are not shy about letting us know about how they feel, and they're not immature. They're not stupid. I mean, they do research every day.
If you listen to a lot of voices going on around, they're anti-Semitic. They want to throw bottles at people. They're the instigators, as opposed to maybe there's just a little bit too much retaliation for October 7th. Maybe the United States shouldn't be spending our tax dollars in that direction. It's all the protesters. They're the ones to blame.
Yeah, no. They're smart enough to know the difference between, this is a deeper discussion between people who would be occupiers or people who would be taking territory away from existing persons and people who practice faith. They know the difference between the two. I mean, Emerson, like I said before, is a very diverse community. And some students, I'm not going to deny their feelings, but I've not seen many students come up to me or go to other faculty and say that they've been threatened. And now, I don't know if that's the case, that they have felt threatened by these protests, but I haven't personally witnessed that. I feel like these student protests, at least the one on our campus, was fairly peaceful, was respectful, was extremely organized in terms of shifts. If you were polite to them and asked, I took a photograph because I wanted to, for myself, and I asked them permission, as you should anybody when you're basically taking a photograph, and they thanked me for asking the permission. As I mentioned, I spoke to them about what their protest's about, and they were about, just the aggressive tactics that, the Israel army and defense are taking towards people of Palestine, putting them in an untenable, an unwinnable position. And they wanted basically a ceasefire and things to stop. They don't necessarily. I think that's what everybody wants. I think people want a peaceful solution if there's
I think you're absolutely correct, and they don't want the United, and if they can't get that, they certainly don't want their tax dollars being spent in that direction.
Yeah, these students could be going to school, and they are at school. A lot of these students protesting and going to class, so they're not necessarily uncommitted to basically their education and making sure that their scholarships or their grants or whatever are being wasted. They're trying to basically do this in as peaceful a way as possible. Now, the parcel of alley land that they were tenting on was city property, not Emerson property. They chose not to go across the streets of the Boston Common because that's basically a city park as well. And I guess maybe they thought better of that. And so that's where they did choose.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Maurice, I want to thank you. I know it's early in the morning, and you got to have your Fruit Loops and whatnot.
For you, Brian, you're the Fruit Loop in my Saturday.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. All right, man. Thanks. I do appreciate it. Maurice Wilkie, the operations manager at radio station WERS, the Emerson College radio station in Boston, and yes, we know each other very well. He used to be one of my producers at another station up in the city of Boston. 508-996-0500 is how you can get onto the program today. And So what did you think? Maurice, he does like to play it down the road, and I get it. As he said, protect the license. And for those that don't know, radio stations have a license that comes up for renewal. College radio stations have them, as well as professional radio stations. And if you are a manager, you're obligated to protect the license. And when you're talking about students like he was, well, then, all the more you got to let them know how to handle stuff. But the bottom line to all of this, and the way that I see it, which may be very different from the way that you're viewing all of this, is that there's nothing but complete insanity going on at this particular time. And I agree with Maurice. You can say, hey, this is the 1960s all over again. If you were around, I certainly was around. I watched it. I watched it with my own eyes in the city of Boston. Protest after protest after protest dealing with the Vietnam War. And at the beginning, I have to be honest with you. At the beginning, if I were of voting age, I would have voted to keep going on with the war. But by 1966, my mind had changed. And certainly by 1968, I couldn't understand what the hell we were doing. I didn't need Walter Cronkite to tell me that. And so a radio station, not the one that I worked at, not the ones that I worked at in the city of Boston, was at the forefront of bringing a lot of this stuff forward. And what I'm hearing and seeing right now is part and parcel to what we experienced 50 years ago. Now, again, you might not agree with what I'm going to say here, but as I look at things and how these protests are spreading, mushrooming across the country, they started small. They're getting larger and happening all over the place. These students are winning. If you look at surveys that have come out across the country, majority of people are saying that what Israel is doing is a genocide. I might not call it a genocide, but the term that is the international term for genocide is what is going on in Gaza at this particular time. And it's our tax dollars that are responsible for this. Most of these students and the faculty are peacefully protesting. Does that mean that there aren't some folk out there not being peaceful? Does it mean that they are part of the college crowd, whether that means faculty or students? Absolutely not. But look what's going on. 118 people were arrested at Emerson. Now, I can see giving them the citation for arrest, then you appear in court and taking their tents away for blocking an alley. I get it. But there's no reason that one student should have a broken arm, another student should have a broken leg. I mean, is this what we're expecting from police nowadays? There was a scene out of Emory University, which is in Atlanta. 2 separate incidents. One college, both were female, both college professors. One actually the head of one of the departments. She was asking what's going on here because she noticed that the police were wrestling with another student. She was saying, what's going on? What are you doing to the students? What are you doing to the students? Next thing you know, a cop just comes up and grabs her. And she goes, what are you doing? What are you doing? And tackled her to the ground. Pulled her arm back like, they were wrestling with a Gumby and put handcuffs on her. And the cop had the gall to say, you were assaulting. Well, assaulting whom? And then, of course, when they got to court, guess what? No assault charge was ever brought forward. Why do you think that is? Because there wasn't one and there's no video showing it. But there's video showing what the cop did to that woman, that one professor. Another professor, same college, same fracas, also tackled to the ground and handcuffed for basically being at the scene. Now, if you are a professor, department head, you're allowed to be on that campus. This is what happened at Emory. This is blind support for what Israel is doing. How blind is the support? Let me give you one more example before I take your calls. Not only has Congress passed a spending plan with money for Israel and Ukraine and to try to stop TikTok, what's his name? Oh, yes, Speaker Johnson. Johnson! Yeah. He, and this is New York Times, I don't expect you to just believe me for telling you this. New York Times had this. Speaker Johnson gets on the hooty hoot, the phone, calls over to the State Department and tells the State Department, if you guys think of slapping sanctions on Israel for the bombing incident, they would hear back from Congress. Can you imagine that? That's how deep-rooted this is. 508-996-0500. I do thank you for your patience. Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'd like to touch briefly on another subject, if you don't mind.
Really? I've got a bank of phone calls here, but go ahead quickly.
Well, in the first hour, someone called about the MIA allowing boys to participate in female sports.
Yes.
And it's not a subject you haven't handled this morning. It's just early.
Yeah, no. Go ahead, man. I'm hearing you.
Well, I live in Dartmouth, and I was watching on Dartmouth cable the Dartmouth girls field hockey team. They went undefeated this season, and they were getting to the quarterfinals of the state tournament, and they had to play Somerset Berkeley, which it's the first time I'd ever watched a female sport, it's always been a female sport, field hockey.
Yes.
And they had a good-sized male in the center forward position, which is akin to a soccer striker, which puts you right in front of the goal. And this guy was just, he'd get the ball directly in front of the net, and he just nudged the girls aside and go straight in at the goal. And he either scored or assisted on every goal that Somerset Berkeley made. And every time the camera went in on the Dartmouth girls after he scored, the look on their faces, just total disappointment. Like, this isn't fair, you know? This just isn't fair. I didn't go out for this sport to be having to be confronted by this, you know?
Yeah, no, I get, I get it, and I guess we could really go by, well, why do girls go out for field hockey? Because basically there aren't too many other options for females at that time. Certainly that's the way it was when I was in high school. I think that this is a conversation that not only families should have, but the individual schools should have, because there's a lot at stake if they decide to forfeit their games.
Yeah, it's just disappointing to watch something as unfair as that, you know?
I got you.
Yeah. Okay.
I hear you loud and clear. Thank you, man. I do appreciate the call. 508-996-0500. Hello.
Hey, bro.
Hey, Brian.
So, I'm not really going to go down the route of taking sides on Palestine or Hamas versus Israel. Other than I believe Hamas should have attacked the IDF and not innocent women and children. on October 7th. If their gripe is with the government of Israel, you don't go after innocent women and children on October 7th. That's where Hamas should lose all support, all political support.
Oh, okay. Okay. I can see where you're coming from, and I would say that's fair game. But if that's the case, then Israel should also be put into the same category.
I wouldn't say that they are.
They absolutely
attacking. No, I completely disagree on the fact that they are targeting women and children. They might be in the area of bombings, but they are not specifically
They are shooting
targeting
people dead. They are shooting them with drones. People
Correct.
that are unarmed walking down the street.
Understand that.
Okay, well, but they're women and they're children.
But here's the problem. What is the uniform of Hamas? Tell me that.
I don't know that there really is one.
Exactly. This is the biggest problem, right? You have it's almost like back in the days of Vietnam.
You don't do it.
No. I understand that, but this is like going back to what you were talking about in the 60s. So in the 60s in Vietnam, they would attach bombs to women and children, and then those bombs would go off and kill our men, right? That's what the IDF is dealing with, right? They do not know who the enemy is.
You know what? If there are rules of engagement, and what the IDF has done is broken those rules, and with impunity. Not only that, the United States knows that they're doing it, and they're letting them continue. There is a huge difference. Got to go. Got to get to another caller. Thank you much. 508-996-0500 to get on to the show. Hello.
Good morning. I just wanted to, I'm not going to take sides either on who's right or wrong, but I will tell you, I would like to say this. Some of these demonstrations in the schools, I don't consider encampments demonstrations. I think that's, going above and beyond what the Constitution allows for. That's private property. People moving in with tents and disrupting. That's not, I don't believe, was the intent of, freedom of speech.
Peaceably protesting. But where are these students learning this? I think, our government is teaching them this. I think our government's failure to follow the laws themselves, or prosecutors who decide they're above the law and they're not going to prosecute, simple crimes of shoplifting and so on and so forth, and just, immigration, not enforcing the immigration laws. They're setting the example for these students to say, hey, following the law is really not that important, and this is what we're going to do to make our point. Just like our leaders are doing. And that's where it's all deteriorating. We're kind of coming to the point where we're lawless now. Even the people who are enacted by law are not following law or enforcing the law. Why would everyday students, the people who are paying taxes, have to follow the law? We're all picking and choosing now which laws we're going to follow. And here's the one last point I'd like to say. I'd love to know the ratio of the number of people who are actually paying taxes and protesting at the same time. Well, I would tend to believe if you are a full-time college student, you're probably not paying too much in taxes.
Thank you. No, nor are their parents. Some of them, most of them.
Maybe. Who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, they're when you talk about some of these elite schools, a lot of people they're on scholarship.
Yeah. So to protest their tax dollars going to Israel, not a good excuse, because you ain't paying the taxes that are going to Israel. You really don't even really have a say. Only the people who have taxation with representation probably should have a right to protest where their money's going.
Got you on that. Kind of makes sense, except for one thing. Yeah, you're right about the protesting on the money, but here's the other part that I think is pretty darn key. When you start looking at what that money is doing and the fact that at least internationally, a war crime is being committed. You certainly have a right to protest that. And you have a right to peaceably assemble. Most of these kids are. And there was something that came out about anti-Semitism. I'm not there. I'm not going to try to put myself in that position. But many of the reports that I've heard, whether we're dealing with Emerson College, Tufts, Northeastern, Harvard, MIT, Columbia, these are the schools that I know of where representatives have come out that are Jewish. Not only have they come out to say, well, we had Passover Seder at our event, but these people are the organizers of the event. So this whole thing dealing with anti-Semitism, I don't know, it seems to just kind of blow up to me. But if you are one of the leaders of the Anti-Defamation League, Here's a guy, his name is Jonathan Greenblatt. He's with the ADL, and he happens to go on that show, Morning Joe, on MSNBC. This is what he was saying about the college student protesters.
About time that the presidents and the campus administrators across the country started again simply saying, you got to play by the rules. I mean, talk about the height of entitlement, right? Thinking that you can just act with impunity wherever you want. You know, it's funny. We're talking about Iran a few minutes ago. Iran has their military proxies like Hezbollah, and Iran has their campus proxies like these groups like SJP and JVP. I mean, look at them. I mean, this is literally like a demonstration in Tehran.
Like a demonstration in Tehran. This is a guy from the Anti-Defamation League calling out Jewish students who are organizing many of these protests. I can only wonder, I wish I could talk to some of these students about what this guy Greenblatt has stated. I see you there on the phone. I'm going to take a break, and then I'm going to come back to your calls. 508-996-0500 to get on to Brian's beat. Yes, welcome back. To go back over what one caller stated, he's right about the encampments. Encampments on private property, they shouldn't happen. And I don't think that the founders meant for encampments to happen or to just go unabated. So I can agree with that, but peaceably assembling and what I'm seeing right now, absolute insanity. And it's not it's working for the protesters. It's not working for the government because people are reading through it and they can see that Israel is backing a lot of this. All right, quickly, let's get to your calls. 508-996-0500. I say quickly, I'm the one that's talking. Hello.
Hey, how you doing, Brian?
Wang in my wang.
All right. Hey, yeah. So I heard you and Barry yesterday, and I've heard you three today. And nobody wants to see peaceful protesters injured, but no one's on the ground at the point where the police are telling someone you need to disperse because you're arm linking or blocking an area or you're encamping. You know, and you and I aren't there when maybe somebody spits in a cop's face or does something that touches it off, because once the police are called in by the universities, they're asked to help to control and disperse the crowd. It's not about peaceably protesting when you're doing something that the university doesn't want to have happen, or like, again, you create a touchstone issue where the cops become more aggressive. So you and I aren't there. We don't see that happening. But I think what's interesting is your call. We had like 4 callers in a row that said the same thing, which I agree is like, they're not it's like, I'm not going to take sides. And you got to ask yourself, why would they start with that statement? Because this is an international issue in Palestine and in Israel. And the only way this is going to get resolved is if the Palestinians and the Israelis get together. There's no connection between this and the Vietnam protests, because those protests were about our country and what was going on here. these protests are going to mean nothing at the end. It's there's a lot of kumbaya and people getting together, and there's a lot of issues being brought up, which is great. But until the Jews and the Palestinians get together to resolve their issues, it's either going to be continued fighting, genocide, or they're going to get together for peace. And, how is it that so many people with so many degrees and so much intelligence can't just look, and over there, not here, look at that and say, let's get together and solve it. Let's get it done. And I agree with you about
because I don't think they want to. I think there's money in war.
Both sides don't want to.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. There's money in war. Hey, I got to let you go only because Pittman's getting ready to come in. And I got to get one more caller. But thank you. I appreciate it. Hello.
Hi, Brian.
Hi, Brian.
Hey, you now. I haven't called you in a minute, but you know what? I won't, because what I need to say, I'll say maybe with Ken, if he allows me, and if you're going to join him a little later.
Why? Is it not about what we're talking about?
It is, but I just don't have a minute to say what I
okay. Well, all right. That's good because I have less than a minute before Ken's going to take over. So I do appreciate you calling, and you can always call back.
Yes, I'll try with Ken.
All right. Thank you much.
Oh, thank you for everything.
I do appreciate it. No problem at all. Thank you for your calls today on the program. Speaking of Barry, the previous caller brought up Barry. Yours truly, you can run away now if you want, but yours truly is sitting in for Barry on Monday. Barry has a family commitment that he needs to tend to, but he will be back on Tuesday. Exactly what we're going to talk about, my guess is there'll be a little bit of this, especially if the protests go on throughout the weekend. I have no idea if they will or if they won't. But that, and also some news dealing with the migrant situation here in the Commonwealth. Pittman is next. I'm Brian.